Hello, everyone. My name is Jeannie Bradley, and I'm this year's Beta Alpha Psi president, and I have the honor to introduce our guest speaker today. We have Miss Susan Bell here from EY, Ernst Young, which many of you know is one of the big four accounting firms in the world, and that right there speaks for itself. She has been with a couple of Big Four, Big Eight firms in her past, and throughout her experiences, she has been a managing partner of the Atlanta firm, which means she was leading 2,200 people by herself, and she has now been promoted to a national position. So we can learn a lot from her, whether you're an accounting major, just a business major, or if you just want to sharpen up your leadership skills, I think she can be a great asset to us. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Susan Bell.
Thank you, Jeannie. And as one correction, you never lead anything by yourself. And trust me, that job is like herding cats. So it has been a fun experience, though. And I'm just delighted to be here today. I was about to say good morning, but it's slightly afternoon, so good afternoon. And I'm at that stage of my life and my career as you go through things that I was trying to think about what should I share today. After 31 years now in the public accounting profession. And as Ruben said, we started long ago. I don't think you dated me, but I just dated myself. And so before I get started, I have to start out with the typical Big Four accounting firm disclaimer, which is nothing that I say can be attributed to anything about my firm or anything else. It's all about my personal views, etc. But seriously, I do want to share some things with you today that I thought you might find of interest. Both in terms of my personal background and sort of the journey that I've taken through the years. A little bit about EY. I like to say we're the firm formerly known as Ernst Young. We changed our brand a couple of years to EY, and I think it'll take probably 5 to 10 more years for that to finally settle in. So EY is now the one name that our firm across all the world goes under and by from a brand perspective. And then I want to talk a little bit about the power of purpose, and I'll show you how that links to both my story and to my firm, because purpose is something that we as a firm are very focused on. And in fact, we have professionals that consult with companies on purpose and the power of purpose. And then if we have a little time, I've got a few of what I call life lessons. A couple of years ago, I started putting down all the things that my grandmother growing up in Mississippi used to tell us as children. And over time in my professional career, I've realized that some of what she taught us was absolutely on point and a total reality in terms of work and life. But a few of the things that we were taught growing up maybe are not necessarily so on point, or is a bit more of a myth versus a reality in terms of the business world. So I'll share a few of those with you as well and save time for Q&A. But I'd also like to say if you have a burning question as I'm talking, I'd rather have a dialogue. So stop me in the middle if you have a question that you'd like to ask along the way. And I'm looking for Ruben to make sure I'm going to have the hook, and that you'll give me a signal when we're getting ready to wind down, because I absolutely want to make sure that we have time for questions. So again, thank you for being here today. I grew up in Starkville, Mississippi. Does anyone know where that is? Very few. Northeast Mississippi, not far from Tupelo, which is the birthplace of Elvis, sort of in the middle of Birmingham, Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi, Memphis, Tennessee, and something down on the coast, I don't know, but sort of in the middle of nowhere, northeastern Mississippi. That it's the home of Mississippi State University, which is where I went to school. My mother tried to get me, I'm one of 6 children, tried to get us to go away to school because she too had gone to Mississippi State, as did her father before her. But we grew up there, and it was a big family tradition, and it was actually a very great place to go to school. But I didn't get out much. All the way through those years, being from a very large family and centered there in Northeast Mississippi. When I was in college, I was working on the college campus in the printing department. I'd actually started doing that when I was in high school because for some reason at an early age, I was very independent and I always wanted to have my own money. My older sister, I'm the second of 6 children, my older sister's 16 months older. She was sort of the opposite. And so I think I prided myself on doing what my sister did not do. And so I worked at an early age, and I got this job on campus, and it was in the printing department. So all the professors would come and get their tests printed and brochures and all these different things. And one of the professors was in charge of the co-op program, which is cooperative education program for the engineering program of the school. And he asked me during my freshman year, well, what are you doing this summer? And I said, well, I'm working here. And he said, well, we have one accounting job in the co-op program. I think you should interview for it. And so the co-op program, under that program, how many are familiar with co-op programs? Am I preaching to the choir here? A few? You work a semester and go to school a semester, so back and forth. And so we have this one position in accounting. It's on the Gulf Coast, which is about 250 miles from Starkville. And remember, I'd not gotten out a whole lot other than a few family vacations. I was like, that sounds good to get away from home. And it was working at Mississippi Power, which is a subsidiary of the Southern Company, which is one of the largest utilities in the U.S. and the large utility here in the Southeast, Mississippi Power being that subsidiary. So I interviewed and I got that job, and I worked for 4 semesters at Mississippi Power while I was in school at Mississippi State. And when I graduated, because of that experience, I decided to go to work for Arthur Andersen, which is at the time one of the big 8 accounting firms. Now, as Jeannie said, there are 4. So Andersen was one of the big 8 and interviewed on campus, and I chose to go to work with them in Atlanta because they audited the Southern Company, which is the parent company of Mississippi Power, where I had some work experience. And I thought, well, gosh, I could be a little bit ahead of the curve by using that work experience. And that's how I ended up at Arthur Andersen, and fortunately got to meet Dr. Bowling Rubin those many years ago, and so that's how we come full circle here today. Well, how many of you have heard the story of Andersen and what I call the meltdown of Andersen? Wasn't a pretty story. Going on 14 years ago now, Enron was blowing up because a whole long story of document shredding and allegations and constructed financial statement transactions, some of which were just leading edge and some would say bleeding edge, but still not over the line. But then they were also doing some things with some of their transactions that went over the line in accounting. Arthur Andersen were their auditors. Arthur Andersen as a firm was indicted and basically, I say, melted down. And so at the time, Andersen had close to 30,000 people in the United States and many more internationally. And the travesty of all of that was that those of us who worked serving clients at the time were kind of snatched up by the other public accounting firms, because all the companies that were out there that needed audits and needed tax work done still needed the work done, so they still needed all of these accountants and folks to do that work. The travesty was that our back office folks and the people that were the receptionists and the couriers and the librarian and all these wonderful people that I'd worked with at the time for almost 18 years were the ones that had difficulty finding jobs. Those of us that were practicing in accounting pretty much landed on our feet somewhere around, and I am very fortunate that I ended up at EY, Ernst Young. But I'll tell you, it wasn't just an automatic that I was staying in public accounting at the time, because just before that, my husband and I had our first and, turns out, only son, who's now just turned 14. And so I was thinking, gosh, that's a big life event. Public accounting is a tough world. It's a lot of hard work. It requires a lot of hours and investment in time, and a client service business, which means kind of being on call. Probably not so much as a doctor in terms of 24/7, but definitely a client service focused business. And here I had a 5-month-old at home, and I thought, gosh, well, maybe this is the time to make a career change. And interestingly, the thing that I thought about was teaching, which is still something I think about for my next stage of life. But someone convinced me to come and interview at Ernst Young. And I met with the area managing partner that day, and I said, well, he said, what are you interested in doing? And I said, well, I've just signed off on my last audit opinion. I was an auditor, by the way, and I call myself a plain old auditor. There are a lot of specialists in public accounting, and I'll show you on a slide. We can hardly fit all the things that we do on a slide anymore. There are a lot of specialists, but I was just a plain old auditor. And you need some of those. It's kind of like you need GP, internists, general practitioner, doctors, and then you have all the specialists. So that's what I was. And at the time, when you audited public companies, so those are companies that are listed on the stock exchange, you could only audit them for 7 years as a partner, and then you had to take 2 years off, and then you could go back on. Now it's a 5-year rotation. You can do it for 5 years. You have to roll off for 5 years. I had just signed the last opinion that I could sign on 3 public companies. I basically didn't have really any clients at the time, and I had a almost 6-month-old son at the time. So I went to this interview, and he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I've always loved serving clients, but I feel like this might be time for me to think about doing something different. and he said, how much do you want to work? And I said, excuse me? And he said, pick your percentage, anywhere from 50 to 100. And I thought to myself, I've never worked less than probably 105, 110% of a normal week. Just that's sort of the business that we were in. And he was serious, that I could do a flexible work arrangement, many options like that. And then I said, well, I don't really have any clients. One of my clients was Delta Airlines, and they had changed their year end from having a June 30 fiscal year end to a December 31 year end. So I had rolled off Delta because I had another client at that year end. That client was GTE MobileNet, wireless company that had just been bought by Verizon. So they were going away. So I didn't have Delta, I didn't have GTE anymore, which was one of the largest jobs in the office, and these 3 other public companies that I had just signed my last opinion on. I didn't have any clients. And do you know what he said? We're not interested in the clients, we just want good people. And that resonated with me. It really resonated with me. And EY is a firm that is known for its collaboration. It's known for its focus on people. In fact, for a long time, we had the slogan, people first, that any decisions we made through the filter of people first. We've adapted that a little bit, as I'll show you in a minute, but that's the reason that I joined EY. I was thinking about getting out of public accounting, not because I didn't like it, but because I thought, wow, it might be time to do something different. But I was really impressed with that. Since being at EY, I came in as a regular old audit partner again. I then moved into our business risk practice, and I led the startup of a practice called Risk Advisory Services, which is services that are not our regular audit clients, but are other clients. And our philosophy is we'd like to do work for everyone. We'd like to be a preferred provider for all these large companies as your auditor, as your tax provider, or as something else. And so much of that something else was in the risk world. And at the time, the Sarbanes-Oxley regulation had been passed, partly as a result, or predominantly as a result of scandals like Enron and the meltdown of Arthur Andersen. And so I spent several of the next few years consulting with companies on the implementation of the Sarbanes-Oxley regulations, including internal controls over financial reporting for those of you who are in the accounting world. I then was asked to lead the Atlanta office, and so that's, as Jeannie said, what I have done for just the past almost 8 years. And in July, I transitioned into a national role, and I'm leading our Financial Accounting Advisory Services group focused on the power and utility sector. So I've spent a lot of time in succession planning and trying to get someone in to come and take my place as the managing partner so that I could focus more on clients, developing teams, developing our people that are serving these clients as clients in this sector that happens to be the sector that I started with way back 30 plus years ago when I was in college working at Mississippi Power. So long story about background, but any questions on that? Now I'd like to share just a little bit about EY. We're growing so fast, I really can't quite keep up. And so I have to go to my cheat sheet here. But we have over 212,000 people in the world. I believe I heard the other day it's closer to 220,000, but I don't have that in writing yet. We're in 150 countries. Our revenues this past year were almost $29 billion. And trust me, being someone from Mississippi, for many years I still say that's the B word, right? Not million, but billion. It's just kind of hard to believe that you're in an organization of that size. Over 65,000 of us are in the Americas, which includes the U.S., Canada, and South America, Central America. EMEA, which is Europe, the Middle East, India, and Africa, has over 102,000. Japan, which you say, why is Japan separate? Well, interestingly, it's a cultural thing, but we operate under these 4 areas, and Japan is in an area by itself. It is also with many large global companies. I just met Mary recently. I think the Coca-Cola company, for example, has Japan as a separate sector. It's just a very unique culture in how they operate, and so our business, too, is separated that way. And then the rest of Asia Pacific is over 36,000. And just a few of the things that maybe from a student's perspective you care about. For several years now, we've been in the Universum rating as one of the world's most attractive employers, both in the U.S. and in the world. And for 17 years now, on Fortune's 100 Best Places to Work. And I will tell you part of that reason, I strongly believe, is our focus on diversity and inclusiveness. And as indicated by when I interviewed, just 13 and a half years ago, and the managing partner said, "How much do you want to work?" That was really almost unheard of at that time. I mean, some of the big 8, then 765, 5 before Anderson melted down, had some focus on diversity, but a lot of it, in my opinion, was lip service. We weren't really practicing what we preached. And at EY, they had actually promoted a woman to partner who reported directly to our chairman, who was responsible for the Office of Diversity and Inclusiveness. And diversity is about the mix, but inclusiveness is about how you make it work, and do you really live it? And do you act on it in your day-to-day work life? And I believe we do do so a lot better than a lot of companies. We still have plenty to work on, but it is a strength of our firm. In fact, when I talk with my former partners who were at Anderson, and we kind of split up all over the place, there's one that's a CFO over an insurance company, and he said, "You know, Susan, when I talk to all of you who are at all these different places, you guys that went to EY seem to be the happiest." And I'm convinced it's because of the culture and that focus on inclusiveness. Another key attribute of the firm is that we're united over all of those 212,000 plus people under one common vision, one common strategy, one common purpose. And that's unique. A lot of the big firms, accounting firms globally, operate more as federations. And so we've done a lot over the past few years. And actually Arthur Andersen was a leader in this space, and EY was sort of emulating that to try to get more and more standardization and more consistency of the culture, so that when you call Susan Bell in Atlanta, but you need auditors or tax advisors anywhere in the world, that you know that you'll be able to get the same quality and the same cultural aspects and same attention that you would get if you were here. And so a couple of years ago, we announced our Vision 2020 strategy, and our aspiration or our vision is to be the number 1 or number 2 in every market that we serve. In Atlanta, we happen to have 50% of the market share among the Fortune 500 and the Fortune 1000. So, you know, among the big 4 firms. So we lead in the market share in Atlanta. Reuben will tell you we did at Arthur Andersen before that, and EY at the time was number 2. And so the Andersen meltdown sort of helped in that regard. But strong market share, which means I tell people all the time we have to play defense and offense every day, because being a leader in the market share means you're getting attacked all the time. We also created one compelling purpose statement for our entire organization, and that is building a better working world. And you'll see that at the top and the bottom of that. And so we've asked all of our people to unite behind that common purpose. So no matter what you do within EY, no matter what your individual role, whether you serve clients externally or you serve clients internally, that you're focused on your part of building a better working world. So if you're in our tax function, you might be helping people understand the tax regulations better. You might be in our Washington, D.C. office lobbying to try to get rules changed to simplify or to make things work better in our world. If you're an auditor auditing a public company, you're helping ensure the capital markets. So when you invest in stocks and bonds, you know that the numbers that are behind those in those companies have been audited well, and that you can rely on those and the disclosures that are there. And many other examples across all that we do. We're also united in our strategic focus areas, which start in the middle. I mentioned earlier people first. People first, those words used to be in the middle. We changed that to highest performing teams. We want to attract and retain and develop and build and nurture the highest performing teams throughout someone's career. We obviously on the left side focus on winning in the market. I have to remind people sometimes we're not a nonprofit, and so winning in the market and growth and service and all is a key strategic element. And then we have another element that goes back to combining all of those offices around the world, which is strengthen globally and empower locally, which means we're going to be smart at the top of the firm and how we deploy technology and how we build our infrastructure and how we build our policies and procedures and guidance, et cetera. But that we're going to empower our local offices, as I would have as managing partner at Atlanta, to make the decisions that are right for the people in our offices and the clients that we serve in those offices and the communities in which we live. So those are our strategic values. All with the underpinning, sorry for microphone here, with exceptional client service. So we expect all of our people to be focused on our customers, again, whether they're internal customers or external customers, and being connected to them, being insightful, being responsive to what their needs are. So it really is uniting when you have this many people around the world that are all singing off the same song sheet in terms of our vision and our purpose and our strategy. So how do we do it? It starts with the people that are in our service lines. We have 4 major service lines. Advisory, which you can see is the first category up there, which includes a lot of areas of performance improvement, helping companies improve their customer relationships or integration, helping them transform their finance function, helping them with their supply chain, strategy, program management, IT. You see the listing there. It also includes our risk practice, which I mentioned that I worked in for some time. One of the basic examples there is our internal audit services, which I've spent a lot of time in. Our IT risk services, information security, we spend a lot of time in the IT security space. Cybersecurity is a buzzword for everyone, everywhere, but it's very, very important to our companies, our clients. The audit committees and boards of directors of these companies are super focused on cybersecurity, so that's a hot area right now. Our traditional assurance practice starts with audit. That's what I call the plain old audit in the first box. Now, I would say it's not really a plain old job, though. You're a plain old auditor, but you're learning about all kinds of businesses and all kinds of processes and all sorts of business risk and accounting and such when you're doing an audit. We have a practice that focuses on fraud investigations and disputes. And so we have certified fraud examiners and people that are former CIA and FBI and all kinds of things that are focused on fraud and forensic fraud and all these technology things that I don't pretend to understand, where they're doing word searches, and I can't remember the terminology right now. They call these GUI things that they go out and crawl over things to figure out if people are committing fraud in companies. Financial accounting advisory services, so that's now the practice that I lead across the Americas for our power and utility sector. So again, that's for clients that we don't audit, but we want to do as many other services as they may need for them, and so advising in that space. And then climate change and sustainability services, which is a really growing practice. So we're helping companies that are issuing reports on sustainability or helping them figure out how to comply with certain environmental regulations or things of that nature. So in that practice, we have, again, some traditional auditor types that might have moved over from regular audit into this that just want to audit in the sustainability area. Everything from that to nuclear engineers that are helping companies figure out compliance with standards and things there. A tax practice, which is again sort of a traditional public accounting practice with federal and state and local, indirect, international, et cetera. Human capital and the implications related to employment taxes and payroll taxes and all those things. And then TAS is transaction support. So traditional merger and acquisition activity, we have a group that focuses just on dispositions when a company wants to divest itself of a certain line of business and wants to re-engineer itself, if you will, in that group. A working capital group, so companies that are just having challenges managing their inventory or accounts receivable, people that specialize in how do you improve working capital so you get more money back into the business that you can reinvest in other things. So that is an overview of all the things that those 220,000 people are doing around the world. Any questions on what we do? Okay, so a little bit about how we do it. And I've called this the power of purpose, and I see that phrase out a lot lately. In fact, I just went to a conference the other day, a global women's forum in Boston, and in the bag to take home that I didn't take out until I got home is a book that's called Fast Forward, and it's about the power of purpose. So it's somewhat of a buzzword right now, but also to me it's something that a lot of companies are living and breathing and executing right now, and I think it's because it's important. It's important to all of you who are coming along in the world and actually want to focus on not just the bare bones of the business, but also the sustainability, as I mentioned, or all the other elements that are important in a good working environment. So just one of the probably many definitions of purpose, it's an aspirational reason for being. I asked my son, actually just a couple of years ago, what do you think the purpose of life is? And he said, unsolicited, and before I was really sort of into the whole purpose thing, he was like, I think we're put on earth here to help others, to make a difference. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. Something that calls you to action, that gives you a grounding. And I like to say that can be that umbrella, aspirational and inspirational statement of why you do what you do as a company or as an individual. So, and what we've been finding as we do the research here is that people are talking about purpose a lot. And I don't know, Ruben, in your entrepreneurial course in strategy, if you're starting to see more of that just in the case studies and the things that you look at. But you can definitely see a lot of companies that are being touted and discussed that are more focused on purpose than ever before. For a while there, we had sort of a string of focus on corporate responsibility and just doing the right thing, and that's part of it. But purpose is really a higher level or a higher umbrella, if you will, in terms of what companies are focused on. So a shared purpose drives collaboration. Again, you sing off the same song sheet. You talk the same language. You're kind of all in this together. There's a typo there on that Wall Street headline that I couldn't figure out how to fix. But instill a sense of purpose, unleash better performance. What millennials want most, a career that actually matters, right? So these things are important in terms of customers if you're in a client service business, but particularly in terms of recruits and talent, people coming to the table. People want to feel like they're doing something that has a purpose. So whether it's from creating value for the customer down these elements in the bottom right here, 85% of folks are focused on creating value for the customer when you're talking about purpose. 76% want to positively impact society, and 63% of the element is to generate a financial return. So there is a profit motive as well in terms of leading with purpose, because when you're working together, you typically have better success. So again, just some quotes about some particular companies. Starbucks is one in particular. Their purpose is to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. Doing pretty well. Unilever, making sustainable living commonplace. This is an interesting one because American Standard I think of when I think of faucets and hydrants, things that are in your bathroom and whatever. Making life healthier, safer, and more beautiful at home, at work, around town, and throughout the world. So these are just some of the examples of what companies are saying is their purpose, what drives them. Some of the research. And as an accountant, you have to get back to the numbers every now and then. We have to focus on what does the data say, what do the facts support. And in terms of getting and keeping the best employees, those companies that have purpose or that embody purpose and live purpose, sometimes we say you can articulate your purpose and then you activate your purpose. So you may say you have a purpose, but if your behavior doesn't drive that, then you're not fully engaged. But those that are very focused on purpose, that really embody it, that are activating it, say that people, employees, are 1.4 times more engaged and 1.7 times more satisfied. That's a big deal when you're talking about people being engaged and what that leads to productivity and retention and the cost, basically, of turnover. 3 times more likely to stay at a company that leads with purpose rather than one that does not. With respect to retaining and attracting customers, 89% of clients believe a purpose-driven company will deliver the highest possible results. So if you have a choice to go work with a company that has purpose versus not, that people would predominantly choose those with purpose. And then increasing shareholder returns. So this is again about the money, and when you're a CPA and you can't help but get back to the money a lot of times. There was a book written by Raj Sisodia, I can't quite pronounce that, but it's down that footnote number 3. He wrote it, I think it was 2007. It's called Firms of Endearment. So those companies that are leading with purpose and goodwill and that sort of thing. Purpose-led companies is sort of my word for them. They've outperformed the S&P 500 index by 14 times between 1996 and 2014. That was something like about 10 times as of 2007, 8, 9, 10, and then it continues to grow. So purpose-led companies doing better. And those that have meaningful brands that are connected to human well-being also outperform the stock market by about 120%. And that was as of 2013. So the numbers are saying that when you lead with purpose, then you're more successful. This is one of my favorite slides now because in January of this year, our firm initiated the Beacon Institute, which is designed to solely focus on the power of purpose and what purpose drives in terms of businesses and results. And it really says that if you have that, I call it the sunburst slide, if you have purpose as that overarching umbrella and you focus on these 5 strategic goals of operational improvement, how you do things better, people and culture, so how you engage your people, how you attract and retain them, how you go to market, your brand, and how you face customers, what you do to achieve growth, and then innovation. All of these are sort of, to me, inextricably linked. They all kind of go together, those 5 things. And I think that if you can focus on those in any business, in any job you're in, and even as any individual, if you think about those 5 things, doing things better, smarter, cheaper, you know, that's something we talk a lot about in consulting is can you do it better, smarter, cheaper? People, the people side, the human element side, your brand, your customer, and then innovating, constantly changing. You can get those things going as an individual for all of your life, your career, you're going to drive success. So that leads me to a slide that I like to use that I apologize because there's some underlying reference here, I'm sure, that someone created in some business book or something several years ago, but I don't know what it is. So those of you who are teaching in the business area might be able to inform me. I've seen different versions of this over the years, but this one actually, one of my HR organizational development folks sat with me at a table when I first took my office managing partner role and asked me what my goals were, what I wanted to achieve, sort of what my purpose was. And we drew on a white tablecloth at this restaurant these circles that overlapped, and I've been using them ever since. And I've added the little smiley face and heart or whatever to make it look a little prettier, and the green arrow. But the bottom line is if you focus on what your skills are, what you do well or what you want to do well, what you should do well or what you can do well, right? And then what you love to do, what you're passionate about, what's your purpose? And then what does the market need, or what does your company need, or what does the world need? Those 3 things coming together, somewhere in the middle of that is a sweet spot. That's the greatest thing if you can find it. And I told people all across our careers that those wheels need to turn together because you need to constantly be reinventing yourself or updating your skills to be able to meet the needs of the marketplace. Remember I mentioned cybersecurity a bit ago. We can't get enough cybersecurity experts right now because it's such a hot field. So changing your skills to meet the needs of the market, but all the while finding some passion and purpose about it, doing something you love, that's what's going to take you to the highest levels of success. And that's what I've found over the years, that no matter the job that I've had, sometimes I've done something that the firm wanted me to do. When I started the risk advisory practice before I was a managing partner, they wanted to start this new practice. They asked me if I'd lead it. I had no desire to lead it. I had a very young son, toddler at home. I didn't really want to travel. The area required traveling to 16, 17 different offices, a bunch of different people. I didn't really want to do that, but the firm needed it. And you know what? I figured out what we were going to do and needed to do and figured out a way to love it and adapt my skills to do it. And so I kind of got my mindset around it. So one of my favorite quotes is to say, you've got to look for these things. You've got to find these things. Pearls don't lie on the sand, you have to dig for them. And if you use this model or some model like that, it'll take you far. 5 minutes?
Yeah, somewhere
5? Okay, all right, so then I'll do kind of fast to the next session. So, okay, right. Any questions about the model? And again, I apologize if there's this HR person was helping, we were drawing these things out, and I've seen things that look similar to that. And when I find it, I'm going to actually quote it and say, whoever dreamed this up was brilliant because this has led me for I don't know how many years now. Well, about 8. I do know how many. About 8 years. Okay. So a few of those life lessons I mentioned, because even growing up, I always kind of had questions about what's the purpose, what's the meaning of life, all these sorts of things. And my grandmother in particular, my mother too, and others in my family, my grandfather always had these quotes and sayings. And so I decided to put them down one day and say which of them were really, really spot on over the past 31 years. So number 1, I always said, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Well, that's true in probably personal life and personal relationships to some extent. But in the workplace, it's often a myth, because it's so important to give timely and candid feedback and to tell people what you believe. In fact, my mother used to always say, count to 10 before you speak. That part's very true. In fact, before the internet and all the email stuff and all, I was taught by a partner years ago, if you're really fired up about something, write a memo and put it in a drawer. And 2 or 3 years later, you remember Tom Elliott even told me this, because I kind of had a redheaded temper. So if you still want to send it 2 or 3 days later, then you can send it. Well, the same thing works for emails. And it's hard, but I go back to those learnings and say, I'm going to fire off an email. I'm upset about something. I wait. I save it in my draft box. I'll put it out later. But you should be providing feedback, and when you go to work, you should ask for feedback. And basically, your actions speak louder than your words. My grandmother always said that too. But the thing is, you can't just be quiet. You can't suffer in silence, so to speak. You should speak up and speak out about what your passion and purpose and your needs are. So, 1 of 6 kids. Yeah, we had some cat fights. And my dad used to say, if you don't dish it out if you can't take it. So is that true at the workplace or not? Partial reality. You need to be able to address that candid feedback. It's so important to learn to dish it out, but also to be receptive of it. And it's hard to do sometimes. You take it personally. So if you keep that in mind, it'll serve you well. I use a process called start, stop, continue. Another one that's, I'm sure, attributable to someone, but it's so ancient in the work world I don't know who did it. But I learned years ago when I was at Arthur Andersen through a great marketing person who said, anytime you're trying to fix something, just stop right there and say, what should we start doing? What should we stop doing? And what should we continue doing that we're doing well? I use start, stop, continue all the time, at home, at work, everywhere. Remember the golden rule. My grandfather always said that. My grandmother always said that. And I think I'm inclined to always say, of course, it's reality. But I say partial reality because what I've learned in the workplace is what I necessarily would want done to me, or the way I would want to be treated, is not necessarily how someone else wants to be treated. So I've learned to try to put myself in others' shoes more than anything and try to think not what do I want, but what might they want. I always start with the golden rule if I have nowhere else to start, and assume noble intent. I can't tell you how many times over the years where you make assumptions, somebody does something, and if you can just assume noble intent from the beginning and then move from there, things tend to work out a much more quicker and much more smoothly. I hesitated to put this one in because I took a few out that seemed kind of silly, but in reality in the business world it matters. First impressions matter in particular. And so my grandmother used to say this. She helped us go and find clothes to interview in when we were interviewing for jobs because she thought that it mattered. She had grown up in the total country of Mississippi and didn't have a whole lot, and she had observed over time that people's perceptions and therefore how you were received maybe for an initial job interview mattered. So it shouldn't matter, but it does matter. And so I always say dress for the job you want, not the one you have. That came straight out of Dress for Success however many years ago. And what I've really learned day to day is that when you don't kind of dress for the job that you want or should have, it can be distracting from performance. And many times, as a woman in particular, I've gotten people say, can you talk to so-and-so about that? Or that's too short, or that's too low cut, or that's too this, or that's too that. So I say, just take that stuff off the table. You're known by the company you keep. Gosh, how many times did you hear that going out in high school or whatever? I used to hear it all the time. And in the workplace, it's a reality. And so networking matters. If you want to be in a business like I'm in that's client-facing and client-serving, being out there and networking really does help. I learned through an article years ago, if you're out at something like this and you don't talk to someone at least 6 minutes, they may not remember you. But if you talk to them longer than 6 minutes, you're not networking because you need to be talking to the next person. So that's just one little tip I'll share that I've never forgotten. There's also a book out there called Never Eat Alone. That's a good way to network. Oh, and then finally, one of my absolute favorites, someone said years ago at a conference I attended, was that relationships are like flowers. They're either growing or dying, growing or wilting. You've got to water them, you've got to nurture them, and they're so important in business, no matter what career you're in. Cup is half full. You know, I think optimism can be a secret weapon at work because there are a lot of people that are not optimistic. And so if you can remember that and just, you know, some of that's a habit. 3 weeks is all it takes to change a habit. Get in the habit of being optimistic rather than pessimistic, and it'll carry you far. What else? Just you can do anything. You know, my mother always said that. My grandmother always said that. Aunts and people in my family were always telling me, you can do anything, Susan. And I believe it. If you put your mind to it, if you sort of find your purpose and your passion. You saw all the different jobs that we have just in my firm alone. Every company, every firm that's out there has such a variety of things. It's just amazing to me. Every time I fly on the plane next to somebody and I say, what do you do? Well, I own concrete trucks or whatever. I'm like, gosh, I haven't met somebody that does that before. There's so many jobs out there. There are so many things that are important in the world. Seek them out. If you have a natural curiosity, it helps if you're in my business because we're auditors and we're curious. And the more you learn, the more people you meet, the more you take with you, and the more that serves you well in the long run. So number one thing that I've learned leading the Atlanta office and herding all those cats is a good leader inspires people to have confidence in the leader. Well, I'm not going to be around that much longer, right? I plan to retire soon. I want people to have confidence in themselves. And so to me, that's what finding your purpose, figuring out what those skills and competencies are that you have or that you want to have. How does that fit with what the market and the world needs? Package that all up together and you're going to be successful. So, do we have 3 minutes for questions? Or two? Questions? Question? Two, oh.
What makes potential employees or interns competitive, like on paper, to get that interview?
Great question. What makes potential employers or interns on paper competitive? Well, in our business, I do have to tell you grades matter because when we're first looking at literally thousands and thousands of resumes, we're looking at grades. So grades and test scores and things like that. That's not to say that people don't get in that haven't got great grades, but that's one of the first things that our folks look at. We look at what you've done in school. We like people that are well-rounded. We're a client service business. We're not bean counters with green eye shades looking down all the time in the room. We don't want our auditors sitting in the back room or our tax people sitting in the back room. In fact, we complain about it because our people sometimes want to audit by email and not walk down the hall. We want people that have involvement, that are people, because that's what our business is. We don't own any assets. We lease our office space, we lease our computers. It's people and it's intellectual power that's consulting with clients. And so, good grades to us means you've worked hard and it's a hard business, and so we like people that have good work ethic. That's for us. I think in general, people want people that have show or demonstrate a good work ethic and a good attitude. Attitude really goes a long way. You can't get that on a piece of paper, though. You have to get to the interview for that. Other question?
Works. It does. Thank you. I'm Sunny. My question that you mentioned you had your first accounting job, like when you were at your first year in college this summer, like you went away for like 250 miles away, if I remember correctly. And then you stayed in this field since, and you have succeeded and very impressively. So, but how did you know that that was you? That was something you wanted to do and dedicate your passion in your life to that field? Because we are facing many choices and
Right.
we don't know sometimes how to choose.
Right,
So
right.
what's your advice? Thank you.
I think it's a great question. How do you know what you want to do? And I did have an early job in accounting. And actually, when I was in the 8th grade, I worked for my aunt was married to a doctor in a doctor's office. I would go down there after school and help them post the accounts receivable and count money and make bank deposits. So for some reason early on, I knew that I liked the idea of money and auditing and figuring out what things cost and how things worked. I didn't necessarily know that I would like being an auditor, though. I sort of took that on faith from professors that suggested it to me. And I think that's why it's important to know what your skills are and what you like. Like if you love numbers but you don't like people, you probably don't want to be an auditor because you have to deal with people, right? And so to me, it's more about figuring out what is it that you really like to do. What do you enjoy doing? What are you curious about naturally? And then evolving with it. There are a lot of people that come into public accounting that don't like public accounting, but there are a lot of other things that we do, both internally and with clients. We have a lot of people that come in to do auditing and move into recruiting or back office finance, like keeping our own books rather than going and serving others. And so I think you try things and you just learn to see what do you like and you not like and kind of roll with that. And you ask a lot of people a lot of questions about what they do and why they like it.
Thank you.
Any others?
Susan, thank you so much. That was an awesome presentation on a day in the life. Really appreciate that. But I guess getting back to your Venn diagram, I think about that a lot, when we're teaching these young 19-year-olds to amortize bond discounts and things like that they want to forget. But I also think about the new RevRec standard, and I just like your opinion on that because that kind of transcends our whole College of Business, from the computer science majors to the marketing majors and things like that, in particular to the telecom industry.
Absolutely. Yes, the question is about the new revenue recognition standard, and so that standard took many years to release and finally is final. They've delayed the implementation until 2018. January 1st of 2018 is the implementation. One of the reasons for the delay is it's going to take so long to take care of it. There are many companies that will be impacted. There's some that won't be terribly impacted, but it's a new model. And so what companies are having to do is go through all of their contracts and figure out what kind of elements they have in the contracts and how that might be recognized under the new standards versus the old. And then they'll have to adjust their computer systems to handle those contracts in the new way and to track that and train employees and the like. And so we've been doing diagnostics. Those companies that have what they call multiple element arrangements that might sell software but also sell services that go with it or other things are going to have the biggest challenge. And so we are helping companies do diagnostics. We have a tool, and we're taking people through contracts and going through the 5 steps basically of the new revenue recognition model. So over the next few years, that's going to be a hot thing because companies are going to need to know how to do it, and they're going to need what I call surge capacity, is extra help in implementing the new standards and going through all the what-if scenarios and then designing their internal controls to support their new processes. So it goes all the way into the business and what the salespeople are doing to then what the accounting folks are doing and all the controls that have to happen, and then the disclosures. And if you do it one way versus another way, that'll drive different disclosures in the financials. So it should be job security for accountants for at least the next 3 years. And leases are coming right behind that. The new lease accounting standard should be out probably this December. And it's going to have similar implications where almost every lease is going to be on a company's balance sheet, which changes their capital ratios and might impact their debt covenants and the like. So again, those 2 standards alone should be the full employment act for accountants.
Well, thank you, Susan. Let's give
You're welcome.
Susan a big hand.